Hello everyone, DM Gashbad here. I know everyone's talking about the old world Games Workshop's new foray into the Warhammer Fantasy world, but it's not here yet, and I'm not real enthusiastic about rebasing a bunch of my stuff, so we're back to Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition, and I couldn't be happier. A member of the gaming group called me up, asked if I wanted to play a game. I just love it when people do that. I hate scheduling games. It's my least favorite part of the hobby. When someone else does it for me, it's great. Not only that, he suggested a big game, 2,500 points. I haven't played one of those in a really long time, very excited about it. So that meant I was using the Orcs and Goblins, my only truly large army. The Empire could get up to 2,500 points if I really tried, but it wouldn't get there in style, so O&G it is. So right off the bat, I want to say I'm a little rusty with Warhammer Fantasy, especially at large point values, and that became obvious as soon as I sat down to start writing an army list. I'm not sure I played a lot of 2,000, 2,500 point games in 8th edition. We were doing mostly small games, 500 to 1,500 points. For the life of me, I could not remember what I used to field. So what I settled on was kind of a basic O&G army with a little bit of everything, maybe with an oblique line kind of idea behind the battle plan. Some faster, harder hitting stuff on one side, some slower, tougher things in the middle, and then some chaff over on the other. This is kind of my fallback battle plan, and I want to keep things simple for my brain. Unfortunately, in the course of this game, you are going to see me make a couple of mistakes. I don't think they're huge, but they're there nonetheless, and we're going to start with one right away. For my general, I took Urzog Footslogga, my Black Orc war boss. The reason I took him is primarily because he's on foot. My orc general is on a boar, and I don't know. That causes some problems. He comes with heavy armor, an additional hand weapon, and a great weapon to start. I was looking around the magic items. I suspected my opponent would be bringing High Elves. That's his largest army. I wasn't 100% sure. There's a chance he could be showing up with Warriors of Chaos. So I didn't tailor the list. I looked through the magic items, and I thought he was okay for magic weapons. I thought I could just leave him with what he had, but I really liked the idea of taking the other Trickster Shard, which forced people in base-to-base contact to re-roll their ward saves. I hate ward saves, and I know my opponents are really good at making them. The issue is that somehow I got it into my head that the other Trickster Shard was a talisman. I don't know why I did this. It's an enchanted item. But because of that mistake, I messed up my other two magic items. First off, I took the Armor of Destiny to give him a 4-up ward save. I checked the ruling on this. It's okay, because a model is not considered in base-to-base with itself for this guy to have a ward save. I don't have to re-roll my own ward saves, just people next to me. But I didn't need to take the Armor of Destiny in order to get the 4-up ward. It's 5 points more expensive than the Talisman of Preservation. But I thought that I'd already taken a Talisman, so I took the Armor instead. But the big screw-up that I made was at the very end, I was hunting around for other magic items to give him just to fill out some of the extra points. And I was like, oh, hey, I haven't taken the Crown of Command. That fits in perfectly. 100 points of magic items for my Black Orc war boss. Great, done. Except, of course, it's an enchanted item. So I doubled up on my enchanted items, which you're not allowed to do. It's not the biggest deal. If I didn't spend those points on that, I could have spent them on something else. Or I could have given the Crown of Command to the Orc Great Shaman who was in the same unit. But it may have made some things different in the course of the game. I don't know, whatever. I messed up. I apologize. It's probably not going to affect the course of the game, but you never know. It was a mistake nonetheless. Moving on from that, I took a second Lord. I took an Orc Great Shaman. Old runes. Just level 4 with a Dispel Magic Scroll. I wanted a level 4 to make use of the power dice, and for dispelling, an orc is tougher and more reliable than a goblin, but I really don't like the orc magic spells. It's just not a very good lore of magic. I don't particularly like the goblin lore of magic either, but I had points to burn. I wanted a level 4. On to heroes, and what I absolutely needed was a BSB. For the Green Omen boys, the Great Northern Army of the Wa, we have our battle standard bearer, Urzog Footslogga. Unfortunately, he is not equipped ideally. He is on a boar, which again is a little bit problematic, and he doesn't have a shield. Still, it's an okay armor save to start with. I gave him a dragon helm to support that, and I gave him the Sword of Might. It's just a good cheap magic item. I took a support shaman, Goblin Shaman, level 2 with the Ruby Ring of Ruin, so at least I have one good spell in my whole army. And one of my favorite heroes, I took Speedo. He is my Goblin Big Boss on a giant wolf. I gave him light armor, a charmed shield, and a potion of strength. Good versatile goblin missile to throw around. On to core. I'm always going to take the Green Omen boys, my orc unit. 26 orcs with shields and full command. No reason not to take Night Goblins. I take the Goblins of Orange Hollow, 31 Night Goblins, full command, nets 2 Fanatics. I find 2 Fanatics about as good as 3 Fanatics. And again, 2,500 points, I feel like I've got some cash to burn on full command and nets. They are equipped with short bows, so not great in hand-to-hand combat, but really no goblin is. I took 2 units of Wolf Riders for chaff, 5 each, spears, shields, 1 has a musician, 1 doesn't. I wanted 1 good fighty unit. I was really tempted to take a big unit of Black Orcs. In the end, the points didn't quite work out, so I went with 25 big guns instead. On paper, I really do like big guns. These guys are equipped with spears and shields with full command. They just don't always work out for me. And then just a little bit of fun that I wanted to throw in there because I've never tried it before, I took 10 Savage Orcs with additional hand weapons. Pretty cheap, immune to psychology, can dish out a fair number of attacks. I thought it might be a good investment. Speaking of good investments, we come to the special section. That's where the Orcs and Goblins shine. I take 2 Goblin Wolf Chariots, 1 just standard, 1 with an extra crew and extra wolf. These guys are great. 3 Trolls, they'll go over on the stronger flank. Basic trolls are about the best things in the Orc and Goblin army book. If I had more of them painted, I'd field a larger unit, but 3 is what we got. I'm going to take a nice big squig herd because those are great too, 15 squigs with 10 herders, and finally 2 Goblin Spear Chuckas. Cheap and accurate artillery. Also in that category, we come to our rare section. I give myself a Goblin Rocklaba, and certainly more accurate than any of those, we've got 2 Goblin Doom Divers, so a fair amount of artillery in the Orc list. Finally, to round out the remainder of my points, I give myself a Mangler Squig. Just haven't used this guy very much. I want him in my army again. So with all that, we've got a little bit of everything. Some fast-moving chaff, some artillery, some solid infantry units. Not a lot of fast, hard-hitting stuff, but we do have the chariots, the Mangler Squig, and the trolls. So I consider this a pretty even mix. To a certain extent, I think that higher point value games, once you start getting past 2,000 points, are really just there to benefit the more expensive armies. They're able to fill out the weaknesses of their army, and the cheaper armies, the cheaper horde armies, just start getting in their own way at higher points values. But it is a lot of fun stuff, so I am looking forward to the game. Over to my opponent, and sure enough, he brought the High Elves. And I was even thinking as he was unpacking his army, I wonder if he had anything new. The one thing that I haven't seen him field in any of his lists is a Phoenix. I wouldn't be shocked if he brought himself a Frostheart Phoenix to this game, and sure enough, I was correct. There it is in all its glory in the upper left. That is about the only thing that I would have been able to predict about this list. It is an unusual High Elves list. No shooting, not a lot of magic, a lot of fast combat power. It's really an army built to take the fight to the opponent as quickly as possible. For his lords, we have an interesting choice. We've got a Prince with the Blade of Leaping Gold for +3 attacks and rolls of 6, ignore armor saves, and the Shield of the Mearworm, which is a shield you can use with your magic weapon and gives you a 4-up parry save. The other lord and the only spellcaster is a Lore Master of Hoeth. He's got the Nasty Book of Hoeth, which allows you to re-roll a casting or dispel die every time the model attempts one, and the Talisman of Preservation for a 4-up ward. I think this is what he's equipped with. His only other character is a Noble BSB with a Great Weapon and the Armor of Calidor. Armor of Calidor gives him a 2-up armor save and a 6+ ward. For core, we've got 25 Spear Elves with a full command, 15 Silver Helms, huge unit, also with full command. The heart of the army is in special. He's got 24 White Lions with full command and Banner of the World Dragon. That's the one that gives you a 2-up ward save against magic spells and magical weapons. He's also got 15 Swordmasters with full command and 10 Phoenix Guard, again with full command. Finally, we got a lone Lion Chariot. Interesting list. I'm surprised at the big unit of Swordmasters and the small unit of Phoenix Guard. Usually my opponent runs them the other way around. No Great Eagles, which I'm absolutely thrilled with. I hate those things so much. No repeating bolt throwers. I think that's okay. Against Orcs and Goblins, I think High Elves can do without them. No high magic, which can be very dangerous, but again, the Lord Master gets the signature spells of all 8 lores, so it's not like those are bad spells. With the big exception of the Frostheart Phoenix, which I'm not really sure how that's going to go, a lot of really expensive toughness 3 troops with not a lot of armor to them. The artillery and fanatics could have a field day. So yeah, start of the battle, I'm feeling pretty good. We're playing on a 6x4 table. The first thing that we're going to do is roll up the scenario. We do discuss whether we should just play pitched battle or roll one up randomly. We decide we're going to go for it. We're going to roll up a scenario off the table and we get pitched battle. You know what? Fine, perfect. And the other thing that we do, of course, is we roll for the number of terrain pieces. Usually we just absolutely overstuff the table with terrain. These tables just love giving us crowded battlefields to fight on. But this time we kind of hit the middle. We get a roll of a 4, which means that we're going to put 8 pieces of terrain down on the table, which isn't so bad. Or it wouldn't be, but we go and we roll for the very first piece of terrain, and my opponent rolls double 1s, which is a settlement of order. So it's not one piece of terrain, but it's D3 buildings, D3 sets of obstacles, and 1 steadfast sanctum. So like it could be a whole battlefield's worth of terrain in one roll. We often go and re-roll the settlements, but again, this time we're just rolling with it. So okay, we luck out to a certain extent and we only get 1 building. That's over in the center left. The Steadfast Sanctum is a Sigmarite shrine. Forces of Destruction have to reroll ward saves. That's over on the center right. And we get 2 sets of obstacles. We've got a couple of ghost fences over on the left and that T of walls in the center left. All told, could be a lot worse. But we still have the rest of the terrain to roll up. We get a magic circle over on the left. Nearby units get magic resistance 2. A mysterious forest, actually 2 mysterious forests, both on the left-hand side of the table. There's also a hill there in the back. We do get a river. Again, something we tend to re-roll, but we're going for it. You know, why start fudging the dice rolls now? My opponent puts that almost right in the middle of the table, off to the right a little bit. There is a swamp in the upper right. That turns out to be a mist-wreathed swamp, so one of the bad ones. Any unit ending their movement phase in there has to make an initiative check, or the Famir come and drag away D6 models. And there's one more mysterious forest in the lower right over by the Sigmarite Shrine. Okay, that was a lot. I find that Orcs and Goblins do not love a crowded battlefield. We like to keep our units clumped together in a big open area of the table so that they can support each other. Don't like moving around terrain and coming at the enemy piecemeal. On the other hand, the High Elves got a lot of cavalry, got some fast-moving stuff that they are not going to appreciate having to stumble through all that terrain themselves. I want to say the table kind of benefits the Orcs and Goblins, but I thought that about the last game that we played, and I was wrong. My opponent won the dice roll to see who got to pick table sides, and he picked the far table side because he didn't want me to have a hill. That does give him a really crowded area to try and maneuver through. The Silver Helms were the biggest problem. His choices were basically setting up in the center of the table and having to crash through that forest right in front of him, or setting up in the center right and having to start in that swamp. He chose the center past the forest. I think he was worried that if he picked the swamp, he would still have to make the dangerous terrain test, and there was a chance he'd have to cross the river in order to get to where the action was. By the way, the whole center section of the river, that 12-inch strip, we consider a ford, and so it counts as open terrain. So it's not as bad as it could be. For the rest of my opponent's deployment, the Frostheart Phoenix is all the way over on the left by the hill, anchoring his flank. Next to him are the White Lions, arranged 6 across. Behind the building on the hill are the 10 Phoenix Guard with the Prince and the Battle Standard Bearer in that unit, which surprised me. To the right of them are the Spear Elves with the Lore Master. Sitting in the swamp, daring the Famir to come after him, are the 15 Sword Masters, and the Lion Chariot is behind the Sigmarite Shrine all the way over on the right. For my deployment, all the way on the left, I've got 1 unit of Wolf Riders. The Squig Herd is angled behind the Magic Circle. I'm thinking I might need to use them to guard the War Machines if the Frostheart starts tearing its way through them. We've got the 3 Trolls with a front rank of 2. Then come the Orc Boys with the Great Shaman, the Black Orc War Boss, and the Battle Standard Bearer all in there. I make another mistake with their deployment. Sorry about this again. The Battle Standard Bearer is off on the right, kind of just tacked onto the side of the unit. When I was deploying these guys, I thought that because he was mounted, that's how he would go. I got that wrong. That's when you have a mount base size that doesn't fit evenly into the unit itself. He's on a 25 by 50. He would have slotted into that unit no problem. I could have maintained their normal width. Again, I don't think it matters that much. I could have just expanded the frontage of the orc boys to be that wide if I really wanted to, but it is a mistake again. To the right of the orc boys are the big guns. Then I've got another unit of wolf riders, the night goblins behind them with the goblin shaman in there. In the middle of the river, I put one of my spear chuckas. It's like the only clear area that I could find, and as far as I know, you're okay doing this. It turns out it's necrotic ooze, which means that it's difficult terrain, and if you move through it, you gain poisoned attacks. Honestly, that works out just fine. The spear chukka is from my Pirate Orcs and Goblins warband, so we probably just built a little raft, and we're happily floating in the middle of that. The other spear chukka is to the left of my night goblins, the doom divers are in the center, and the rock lobber is behind the trolls. To the right of the river, I've got my Mangler Squig. The Savage Orcs are right behind him, and my Goblin Big Boss is to the right of the Mangler Squig. And then all the way on the extreme right flank, I've got my 2 Goblin Wolf Chariots. For spells, my Orc Great Shaman goes and rolls no duplicates, so he has to take what he got. In this case, it's Fists of Gork, Brain Bursta, Ed Butt, and Ear We Go. So no Hand of Gork, no Foot of Gork. With the exception of Ear We Go, the rest of these spells are pretty bad. I do replace Fists of Gork with Gaze of Mork, but it's replacing a generally bad spell with a generally not good spell. On the other hand, the Goblin Shaman goes and rolls up the 2 best spells from the Goblin list. Gift of the Spider God, which gives people poisoned attacks, and Vindictive Glare, which is a big magic missile of strength 2 attacks. Both very fun. So after deployment, I'm not feeling too bad. I think that my chaff on the right side of the river can do pretty well just holding up that big unit of Swordmasters and the Lion Chariot. I'm absolutely okay if that side of the battle just doesn't achieve anything particularly important. I think the group over there will have done their job. I think the Silverhelms are going to have a tough time. They are deployed directly opposite a unit of chaff and my Night Goblins with the Fanatics in there. They've got my artillery and the woods to contend with. And even if they escape unscathed, I think the big guns can do pretty well against them. I'm not as confident with the rest of the stuff. The White Lions are a big problem. The Frostheart is a big problem. I'm less concerned about the Phoenix Guard and the ordinary unit of Spearmen, but I've learned not to underestimate them either. But I think I might have the ability to kind of chaff up the High Elf advance with the Wolf Riders while I go after them with the artillery, and then make it a fair fight once we all get to grips with each other. Before the game begins, though, I do get some Vanguard moves. My opponent was nice enough to point that out to me because I was about to forget it. The Goblin Big Boss moves behind the shrine. The central unit of Wolf Riders goes behind the wall like that, just positioning them so that they can move up and get in the way of anyone advancing too quickly towards me. And the far unit of Wolf Riders goes all the way to the extreme left-hand edge, faces the rest of the table, and reforms like that. So now the battle is ready to start. My opponent gets a +1 because, of course, he finished deployment first, and he wins the first turn and opts to take it. The first thing that happens is the Prince and the Battle Standard Bearer leave the Phoenix Guard and join the White Lions, who have marched forward into that wood there, which unfortunately they find out is a wild wood, which means that at the end of every movement phase, you have to roll a d6 for any unit in there, and on a 4+, they take d6 strength 4 hits, which could really hurt the expensive White Lions. I asked my opponent about why he had his command group set up in the Phoenix Guard behind the buildings to begin with, and the answer was he was worried about me getting the first turn and dropping a bunch of artillery on the Silverhelms, forcing a panic test, and then failing a panic test on their basic leadership of 8. He wanted his command group within 12 inches of the Silverhelms at the beginning of the battle to prevent them running off the table turn 1. Since he got the first turn, they were able to advance a bit, and he's less worried about them running off the table. Just shows you that he's really thinking ahead with this kind of stuff. The Phoenix Guard do a swift reform and enter the building. More building shenanigans, I kind of expected that. Silverhelms and Spearmen advance to the building edge right in front of the forest. And the Frostheart Phoenix, completely unafraid of anything in my army, just plants itself right behind that wall, daring me to charge it. This is an unexpectedly bold move from my opponent. Yes, I know that my armies really struggle against big monsters. I can spend all game trying to get a 6 to wound something and have it never come up. But I didn't think that my opponents had figured this out. I think word may have gotten out about how bad I am at dispatching large monsters. Disappointing. On the right, I think my opponent is thinking much the same thing I am. He's happy to just keep my random chaff units occupied over there. So the Lion Chariot just tucks itself behind the Sigmarite Shrine, and the Swordmasters stay where they are in the swamp. Fortunately, they pass their initiative test and so don't get bonked on the head by the Familiar Clubs, and the Wild Wood does not come up with a 4-up, so the White Lions don't take any damage either. In the Magic phase, he gets a pretty low score for the Winds of Power. I believe a double 2, so 4. I took a lot of pictures for this battle report, but I made very few notes, so the ins and outs of the Magic phase or some of those details are going to get missed. Just in general, we did a lot of channeling this game. My opponent channeled a lot, and I did okay myself. In the end, though, all that happened was the Loremaster got Ice Shard Blizzard on my Orc unit, which is not great. They're now -1 to hit in hand-to-hand combat and -1 leadership. He then immediately followed that up with a Spirit Leech, trying to pick wounds off of my command, but I did dispel that. And because he rolled so low for the Winds of Power, the Phoenix is at -1 strength. The Frostheart Phoenix, though, is strength 6, so I don't feel like it's doing me a whole lot of favors. With no shooting, it's on to Orc and Goblin turn 1. The Wolf Riders pass their terror test, the Trolls pass their stupidity test, but then I start to have a few problems. I work from right to left making animosity tests, and it goes okay until I get to the squigs. The Orcs have passed their animosity, but the squigs failed it and I rolled the worst result. I rolled a 1 on the animosity chart. That means that the unit can't do anything this round and spends the entire time throwing rocks at the Orc boys because they are a unit that is subject to animosity within 12 inches. That kills off one of my Green Omen boys, and now they automatically fail animosity. Even though I've got a Black Orc character in there, it doesn't protect against this sort of thing. They throw rocks back. Fortunately, their aim is off and they don't cause any casualties to the squig herd, but that's rough. Can't move either of those two units, and the Great Shaman can't cast any spells. But we're not done yet, because both of my Wolf Riders go and fail animosity as well. I had forgotten why I don't particularly like using Wolf Rider units for chaff. Because on a failed animosity test, they will go and haul off and charge something that you really don't want to charge. In this case, the Wolf Rider unit on the left is going to go and charge the flank of the White Lions. They're going to leap over the ghost fence and crash through the forest, the Wildwood, I might add, and then they're almost certainly going to get slaughtered by that unit. And the other Wolf Rider unit charges the Frostheart. That is not helpful at all. I was considering a couple things with this Frostheart. I could have just left it alone and shot it with all my artillery. I could have charged the Wolf Riders past it to just do a suicide charge into the Spearmen or something, and then used my Trolls to attack it, which I think could have bogged it down for a little bit. But no, the Wolf Riders are going to charge in there instead and give it some easy combat resolution. The thing is, none of this needed to happen. If I was more in practice, I would have realized that Wolf Riders are prone to do this kind of thing, and when I vanguarded them up, I could have faced them away from the enemy, so they wouldn't have gone and made these stupid charges. But I didn't remember that, and now I'm really going to have to pay for it. I'm going to lose all of these Wolf Riders, and I have to think about what I'm going to do with this Frostheart. I could just eat this bad situation, let the Frostheart kill the Wolf Riders, and have that be that, or I could charge in with the Trolls and go ahead with the original plan. In the end, I charge with the Trolls. I think there's a good chance they're going to hold the Frostheart. I haven't thought too far past that point, but long term, I think it's better for me to slow everything down in a big mess in the middle. We'll see. Since the Wolf Riders are cavalry, the Wolf Rider unit on the right is charging into a defended obstacle, so they have to make a dangerous terrain test, and I lose one of the Wolf Riders there. Cool, less for the Frostheart to kill. And the Wolf Riders on the left actually have to make 2 sets of dangerous terrain tests, one for jumping over the wall, one for crashing through the woods, and they lose 2. I was kind of hoping that they'd fail their panic test and just move off, hopefully preserving those points, but they don't. They pass. On the main area of the battlefield, I don't have a lot of units to move. The squigs and orcs can't move, of course. The big guns stay where they are, just keep my battle line, as do the night goblins. They don't need to get any closer to those silver helms. Less concerned about the Mangler Squig, he can go and do Mangler Squig things. He trundles up to the middle of the battlefield over there. I'm not sure it's a great idea, but I move the Savage Orcs aggressively behind him. And the Wolf Chariots tuck themselves on the other side of the Sigmarite Shrine, looking to set a trap for the Lion Chariot. End of the movement phase, the Swordmasters pass their initiative test again, but the Wildwood is angry at the White Lions, don't like those big axes I guess, and squashes 4 of them. One of those is an empty base because the tab of the model broke off in transit. It's another fairly lackluster magic phase. I believe I get off a boosted Vindictive Glare on the unit of Elf Spears, but I only managed to kill 1 of them, which is disappointing. The shooting phase is likewise not very productive. The Rock Lava targets the Elf Spears. It only deviates 2 inches, so it gets a pretty good hit, but only manages to squash 2 elves. Both Spear Chuckas missed the Silver Helms, 1 Doom Diver missed, the other one destroyed itself, that's not great, and we're over to hand-to-hand combat. The Prince and the BSB make way to the flank of the White Lions and have no trouble killing off all my Wolf Riders before I get to strike. They then hop right back to where they were. How did you think that was going to go, you stupid goblins? Then we're over to the Frostheart Phoenix battle. The one thing you can say about this Frostheart Phoenix is that it's not terribly great on offense if it doesn't get its Thunder Stomp. And because I'm fighting it with Monstrous Infantry and Cavalry, it does not. So it's just got its basic 4 attacks, and it only manages to kill 1 Wolf Rider. On defense, though, it's tough to beat. Toughness 6, 5 wounds, 5 up armor, 5 up ward, and it has a special rule where any unit in base-based contact is -1 strength. Not any model, any unit. With all that, it's not surprising that the Wolf Riders didn't cause any damage. However, my opponent believed that the -1 strength is off of the model's stat line, so the Troll's Vomit attack would be at its full strength. Well, I was going to vomit on the Frostheart anyway, because that would give me automatic hits and I wouldn't have to deal with the -1 to hit trying to strike over a defended obstacle, so the Trolls get lucky. They barf on the Phoenix 3 times and manage to put a wound through. So my guys actually win combat by 1, but the General and the BSB are right there at leadership 10 with a reroll. The Frostheart isn't going anywhere. Still, could be worse. Back to the High Elves, and it is a busy turn 2. The White Lions with the Prince and BSB charge the Trolls. The Silver Helms spur their mounts and trample through the forest into the Wolf Riders. This time, it's the Silver Helm's turn to make 2 sets of dangerous terrain tests. 1 for the forest, which turns out to be an Abyssal Wood, and 1 for charging a defended obstacle, and 5 Silver Helms end up getting themselves perished. So far, I think I may have caused more damage to myself than the enemy, and the terrain has caused more damage to the enemy than I have. In remaining moves, the Swordmasters march out of the swamp to face my Goblin Wolf Rider boss that I forgot to mention had tucked himself around the other side of the Sigmarite Shrine in the upper right. They show the Silver Helms how it's done and don't lose a single model to dangerous terrain. The Line Chariot moves forward a little bit towards the Mangler Squig and the Savage Orcs. It's possible that it failed a charge. I honestly don't remember. The Spear Elves advance into the Abyssal Wood and the Phoenix Guard exit the building behind them. It was a higher power score in the magic phase, but again, I don't think a whole lot happened. The Phoenix does get a +1 ward save because of the higher roll. It's now got a 4-up ward. The Lore Master did cast Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma on the Orcs, which lowered their weapon skill by 1 or 2. And that's about it. Over to hand-to-hand combat and the big fight in the middle. The Elves continue to underperform. It's now the Silverhelm's turn to have a -1 to hit because they're charging a defended obstacle, and somehow they only manage to kill 2 Wolf Riders. Same goes for the Prince with his Blade of Leaping Gold, the BSB with his Great Weapon, and all of the White Lions with their Great Weapons, and of course the Frostheart Phoenix. With a couple of regeneration saves, the Trolls only took 1 wound, which is crazy. It is exactly what I wanted. I really wanted all 3 Trolls to survive because I have an opportunity. The High Elf BSB is tucked in the far right corner of the White Line unit, which means that all of my Trolls are in contact with him and we can all vomit on him. With Strength 5 against Toughness 3, we do a bunch of wounds, and with only a 6-up ward, he fails to prevent the damage. And we melt this really valuable game piece. The thing is, my opponent actually saw this coming the round before. He had made a mental note to himself when my Wolf Riders charged the flank of his unit to reposition the BSB when he reformed after winning the combat to put him someplace else, but when the time came he forgot and he didn't remember until we were already engaged in combat in the next round. It's absolutely the kind of thing that I wouldn't have even considered. So I don't hold it against him for forgetting. I congratulate him for thinking of it in the first place. That said though, the High Elves do win this combat by an absolute pile, and both the Trolls and the Wolf Riders break. The lone Wolf Rider does get away. He runs away from the larger unit, which would be the Silver Helms, so he kind of goes off to the left through my own units, not causing any panic because we're orcs. Besides, we pass a panic test for the Trolls breaking, so we're fine. The Trolls do get run down. The Phoenix doesn't go particularly far though. So the Phoenix is out of combat, moving off chasing the Trolls to the left. The White Lions end up crashing into my Orc boys with all my command, and the Silver Helms complete a charge into the Orc Biggins. That does bring out the Fanatics from the nearby Night Goblin unit though, and the Silver Helms end up stomping on top of one of them, meaning that they take 2d6 strength 5 armor piercing hits and lose another 5 Silver Helms. So it's fair to say that this game has absolutely not gone the way I expected it to, but so far I'm okay with some of the trade-offs that I'm making. Back over to the Orcs and Goblins, and we all pass Animosity this round, and I've got a really important job for the Squigs. They need to charge the flank of the White Lions and save my Orc boys. It is not a terribly long charge. We only need a 6 on the dice, but we roll a 4 and fail. Not great, Squigs. Not a great start to this battle. Meanwhile, the remaining Fanatic gets confused and crashes back through my Night Goblin unit, killing 4 of them. On the other side of the river, my Mangler Squig has a nice path lined up for him. He can go through the Lion Chariot and then back through the Swordmasters, and that would be really fun, but he doesn't roll high enough. Not a really high number that he needed on his 3d6, but he doesn't make it, and so just spins around right in front of the White Lion Chariot. Remaining moves, Speedo. The Goblin Big Boss on the Giant Wolf doesn't like his odds facing off against a whole unit of Swordmasters, so he runs around the other side of the Sigmarite Shrine. The Savage Orcs advance on the Phoenix Guard, opening up their flank to the White Lion Chariot. If it wants to go and charge me, it's going to have to move into contact with the Mangler Squig. The Wolf Chariots continue hanging out where they are. I think they fire their short bows in the shooting phase. They don't accomplish anything. My Goblin Shaman goes and leaves the Night Goblin unit, which advances a bit towards the Spearmen. I know there's a Fanatic wandering around, but it's a lot safer than facing down that entire unit of Elves with the Lore Master. And over on the left, my Lone Wolf Rider rallies mistakenly. We forget that the unit is below 25%, and so we'd only rally on a double 1. Don't worry, eventually we're just going to take him off the board. It's a pretty good magic phase for the Orcs and Goblins. Old Runes manages to cast Here We Go, affecting both the Big Guns and the Orc boys, allowing them to re-roll attacks in hand-to-hand combat. And Glibnats, the Goblin Shaman, manages to cast Gift of the Spider God on the Orc Big Guns. It would have been better for me to cast it on the Orc boys, but he was out of range. Gift of the Spider God is only 12 inches. Shooting doesn't accomplish a whole lot this round, but we do manage to stick another wound on the Phoenix with the Spear Chukka. Hand to hand, and the Big Guns fight first. I'm pretty confident about this combat going in. I do lose 4 Big Guns to the Silver Helms, but then strike back and kill all 5 of them. Yay, Green Oben Big Guns, you did something. We elect to stay exactly where we are. I think these guys are going to be needed in the next round. But in the main combat of the Orc boys versus the White Lions, Urzog Footslogga, Black Orc War Boss, challenges, and the High Elf Prince politely declines. My opponent does not love his Prince's chances in combat with Urzog, especially this first round when Urzog is +1 strength. For my part, I'm really happy that I decided not to give him a magic weapon, because that Banner of the World Dragon would have meant that he got a 2-up ward save against any wound I inflicted, which would have been a real problem. As it is, he'd be looking at taking a bunch of wounds and then having to re-roll any successful ward saves. Yeah, he just didn't like the idea. Plus, he's got a lot of attacks, but they're strength 4, so against my heavy armor, toughness of 5, and a 4-up ward save of my own, he lets the White Lion champion take this particular challenge. Urzog leaves his disappointment by butchering the White Lion champion and taking no damage in return, which is great. Both White Lions behind this challenge target my Orc Battle Standard Bearer, but again, fail to cause any harm. High Elves not rolling particularly well in close combat. The BSB is actually locked out from attacking because of the challenge happening right in front of him. I lose 6 Orcs to the combined attacks of the White Lions, again, could be worse, and I kill 2 of the White Lions in return. Could be better. In the end, the Orcs lose, but we are steadfast, well, and stubborn because of the Crown of Command, and we easily pass our break test. Back to the High Elves, the Phoenix charges in to help out the White Lions, and the High Elf Spears with the Lore Master don't like the idea of charging into that angry unit of big guns that just slaughtered all the Silver Helms, especially when they are upgraded with both Here We Go and Gift to the Spider God. They charge into the Night Goblins instead, who don't do anything with their stand and shoot. On the right side, our game of cat and also cat continues. The White Line Chariot backs up away from the Mangler Squig, and more building shenanigans as the Swordmasters enter the Sigmarite Shrine. I don't mind this. It means that the Swordmasters can't charge anyone in the next round at the very least. Not too much happens in the magic phase. The power score is a little bit better, and I believe the Phoenix gets +1 initiative. I think Ice Shard Blizzard is cast on the Orc Biguns, but if I'm not mistaken, the Lore Master had a failed cast of Wissen's Wild Form, and that ended the magic phase a little earlier than he would have liked. I believe the strategy going into this game was that he had all these signature spells, and he was going to cast a bunch of them every round with a small amount of dice and hope that the Book of Hoeth would allow him to meet the casting rolls. Unfortunately, I don't think a single reroll from the Book of Hoeth actually improved his score, and so he did end up with a couple of failed casts. In the hand-to-hand combat phase, we start off with the High Elf Spears against the Night Goblins. This should be pretty one-sided, but the Night Goblins do manage to net the High Elves, which helps a fair amount. We do at least get one rules mistake on my opponent's side. I don't want all the mistakes to be on my side. He attacks with all 4 ranks of the spears. I had completely forgotten that High Elves attacked an additional rank. It was a real shock when those White Lions came in and dropped all those attacks into my Orc boys. However, the spears allow you to gain an additional rank of attacks, but not on the charge. But still, it doesn't matter that much because he, again, doesn't roll particularly well and only kills 5 Night Goblins. For their part, the Night Goblins strike down 2 of the High Elves themselves, and so they're looking at a 5 or less break test thanks to Urzog and the BSB being close by. They managed to pass it. Fantastic. The longer those Night Goblins keep those High Elf Spears occupied, the better. Over to the Orcs versus the White Lions and the Phoenix, and Urzog challenges again. To his credit, the Prince doesn't run away and finally accepts. He puts 1 wound on Urzog, but Urzog strikes back and chops 2 into the Prince. Elsewhere, things do not go as well. I lose 7 Orcs and don't cause any damage to the White Lions. My Orcs are now at -1 strength. We lose again. We're no longer steadfast, but we are stubborn, and we hold. Back over to the Orcs and Goblins, and the Squigs finally get their act together and charge the flank of the Phoenix. If anyone can do a bunch of damage against this Phoenix, I'm hoping it's these Squigs. The Biguns on the right have a choice. We can charge in the flank of the High Elf Spears and save the Night Goblins, or we can charge into the flank of the White Lions and help out my Orcs. I decide that it's the Night Goblins' job to die, so we charge into the White Lions. On the other side of the river, my smaller wolf chariot and the savage orcs position themselves to try and intercept the Phoenix Guard. The Mangler Squig again fails to make contact with the lion chariot. The larger wolf chariot hangs around by the Sigmarite Shrine waiting for the Swordmasters to return, and the goblin big boss on the wolf just dances around the lion chariot, taunting it. The savage orcs, like champs, did manage to pass their frenzy test to avoid hauling off across the river after those Phoenix Guard. In the magic phase, I believe the only thing of note was that Gift of the Spider God was again cast on the Orc Biguns, and the shooting phase was another bust as no damage was caused. The Night Goblins managed to net their opponents again, but it did them very little good. They lose 7 goblins and don't manage to pull down a single elf. They're looking at a double 1 break test, which they fail, and then they go and pass thanks to the Battle Standard Bearer's reroll. Oh, those brave little goblins. I take back anything bad I might have said about them. That is a really good turn of events. I didn't need them breaking in my turn to have those spearmen reform and charge the rear of my Orc Biguns in their turn. So over to the other combat, and I'm feeling pretty good. To start with, the Prince fails to put any damage on Urzog, who in return chops his head off. There goes the High Elf General. 2 Biguns and 5 Orcs die from the various attacks from the Phoenix and the White Lions. We only managed to kill off 2 more White Lions, but we do put a wound on the Phoenix up to 3. And then the Phoenix attempts to stomp on the squig herd, only managing to kill one herder and one squig. In the end, the Orcs win, but only by a very slim margin. Unfortunately, without the General and the BSB, the White Lions break and are run down by the Big Uns. Another big swing for the ONG. The Phoenix, with his leadership of 9, manages to hold, but the Big Uns pursue straight into its flank. In victory, I go and reform my Orcs in a long line. Urzog and my Battle Standard Bearer are not in contact with the Phoenix. I'm a little worried that the Phoenix can target Urzog and kill him off, and then I'd be in a lot of trouble, even though his other Trickster Shard would be really helpful in making that guy reroll his ward saves. My opponent might not be striking particularly well, but he's been really good at his ward saves so far. Also, keeping those two at the end means that they are in leadership range of the Night Goblins. Wouldn't mind if those guys kept holding out against those High Elf spears. Back over to the High Elves, no charges, but the Swordmasters again go and leave the building, this time setting themselves up behind my Savages and the Wolf Chariot. The Phoenix Guard are happy where they are and just stay put, and the Lion Chariot goes and faces the larger of the Wolf Chariots on the other side of the Sigmarite Shrine. The magic phase gets a little bit more active. I believe that the Phoenix goes up to a 4+ ward save again. It's possible the Lore Master also puts -2 weapon skill on the Orcs, and he also uses Spirit Leech to kill off my Goblin Shaman. That's too bad. The Goblin Shaman had the best spells right now. Here we go is nice, but the other spells I can't really use while I'm in combat with the Great Shaman. Maybe I should have kept Fists of Gork. Again, in hand-to-hand combat, the Night Goblins manage to net the High Elf spears, but it doesn't help them. They lose another 7 goblins and can't inflict any casualties in return. Can't ask for miracles 2 rounds in a row. The goblins finally break. They lose their standard, the Spear Elves elect not to pursue and reform back towards the Big Uns. In the Phoenix combat, the Phoenix chooses to attack my Great Shaman with its standard attacks, but again doesn't roll particularly well and only puts 1 wound on old runes. From the combined attacks of the Squigs, the Orcs, and the Big Uns, it does take 1 more wound, only 1 remaining, but that's all it needs. A really rough looking combat for the Phoenix is helped out by a big max damage stomp onto the Big Uns. We lose 6 of those and only manage to win the combat because we have a musician. Unsurprisingly, the Phoenix makes its 8 or less break test. Stupid big monsters. And we're back to the ONG. You can't see it from this picture, but on the far side of the shrine on the right, I feel like I finally pinned down that High Elf Lion Chariot. And so Speedo drinks his potion of strength and charges it in the rear, and my larger Wolf Chariot charges it in the front. I believe my Savage Orcs again pass their Frenzy check and just try and move towards the Phoenix Guard as quickly as they can to get away from the Swordmasters. The Mangler Squig moves over in that same direction to help out. The Goblins are below 25%, and so they can't roll a double 1 to rally. They flee off the table going through one of the Spear Chuckas, which fails its panic test and can't shoot this round. In the magic phase, we only have 1 good spell to cast, and that is Here We Go, which we do manage to make happen. In shooting, a Doom Diver misfires and it can't shoot next round, but the Spear Chucka does manage to actually do something and kills off 4 of the Elf Spears. On the right, the Wolf Chariot does okay, and its impact hits put 2 wounds on the Lion Chariot. In return, though, the Lions strike back and destroy the Goblin Wolf Chariot, and the White Lions on the back turn around and strike at Speedo. They hit twice, but Speedo does have the Charmed Shield and manages to negate one of the hits. I don't have to re-roll it due to the Sigmarite Shrine because it's not a ward save. It's now up to him. He's got Strength 7 and 4 attacks, but he needs to cause 2 wounds. He manages to do it. We spent the whole game chasing each other around, and I lost half my wounds on the Goblin Big Boss and my Wolf Chariot, but we did manage to cancel that threat. In celebration, he overruns a tiny amount just to irritate those Swordmasters. Things go less well over on the left. First off, the Phoenix manages to kill off my Great Shaman. There goes my entire magic phase. For our part, we fail to take away its last wound. The only good news is that he's a lot less stompy this round and only manages to kill 1 squig. We win the combat by 3, but it makes it 6 or less break test. Gross. 3 infantry units, 3 characters, 2 flanks, and the one that came out ahead this round was the Phoenix. I have no sympathy for the people who complain that big monsters aren't strong enough in Warhammer Fantasy. I'm so sick of this Phoenix that in a very blurry picture, I go and reform the Orcs again, bringing Urzog and the BSB into contact with him. I'm going to finish him off this next round, or I'm going to die trying. Also, reforming into ranks gets me further away from those High Elf spears. Back to the High Elves and a very rocky movement phase. First off, the High Elf spearmen fail their charge against the Orc big guns. It was definitely on the longer side, but it would have been devastating. Also longer but devastating would have been the charge from the Swordmasters against the rear of the Savage Orcs. Again failed. Staying alive, staying alive. And finally the Phoenix Guard go and make a calculated risk and go and walk onto my Mangler Squig. They know they're going to take 3d6 strength 6 hits and then kill it. Figuring an average roll of about 10 or 11 and then his 4-up wards, he figures he's going to take a couple of casualties and then be okay. That plan goes a bit sour when I end up rolling triple sixes for the number of hits from the Mangler Squig. Just goes berserk stomping all over these elves. I did say that my opponent has been pretty good on his ward saves, and he saves a bucket load of them. Still, loses 6 Phoenix Guard, and now they're looking real shaky parked in front of my Savage Orcs. Here we see a dead big gun. I have no idea why, can't even imagine why that guy might have gotten killed. But it's a better photo than the next one, so I'm going to stay on this for just a moment. I'm not exactly sure what happens in the magic phase. Maybe that big one got killed by magic. I don't know. Maybe my opponent hit me with another Ice Shard Blizzard or Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma. Maybe he had another failed attempt at Wissen's Wild Form. Not sure, but we go on to the hand-to-hand combat phase. Did I mention that this Frostheart Phoenix makes everyone always strikes last? Hasn't really mattered a whole lot because the High Elves would have been striking before me anyway. But it does mean that his Thunderstomp goes at the same time as everyone else's attacks, and again he gets extra stompy and kills off another 6 big uns. However, Urzog is sick of this great big bird. He goes absolutely berserk and puts like 4 wounds on the Phoenix, needing 6s to wound and everything. That's it for the Phoenix, it finally dies. The big uns and the Orc boys about face to face the High Elf spears. There's not a whole lot left of us. We might need to clear the road to get those squigs into there. Orc and Goblin turn again. It's turn 5 and we've got a couple of opportunities. The Savage Orcs and the Goblin Wolf Chariot charge into the much depleted Phoenix Guard unit in front of us. The big guns decline to charge, but we do march right into the face of those High Elf Spearmen. If they want to come get us, then they're going to have to face a bunch of our attacks. The squigs move up behind them. The idea is if the spearmen want to kill my big guns, then the squigs will be right there next to them to fight them after they've taken a couple casualties from the big guns, hopefully. I know the squigs won't panic because they're immune to psychology. And more importantly, all this keeps those guys further away from my real points, which is my battle standard bearer, the orcs, and my war boss. All the way over on the right, Speedo moves behind the Swordmasters to march block them and just make rude faces. No magic, no shooting damage. Over to close combat, the Wolf Chariot only manages to kill 1 Phoenix Guard with its impact hits. But the good dice have been used up on the ward saves. They only manage to kill off 1 of my Savage Orcs in return. The Savage Orcs chop up 2 of the Phoenix Guard. They break and are run down. It is the last High Elf turn, and my opponent declines to charge the Orc big guns. They shuffle off a little bit to the right, and the Swordmasters re-enter the building, primarily because it protects them from the Rock Lava. A Rock Lava hit will only cause d6 hits as opposed to getting everyone under the template when they're in the building. For this last round, my opponent has decided that his best shot at picking up more points is to use magic to attack my Orcs with all the characters. He starts off with an Ice Shard Blizzard, and I've learned my lesson on that. I know that Spirit Leech is coming next, so I dispel the Ice Shard. Sure enough, Spirit Leech comes up, but my Black Orc Warboss does manage to roll a 6, meaning that he's able to resist the effects. No further damage is caused. It's back to the Orc and Goblin turn. I decide that I'm probably ahead on victory points, and any charges I make will probably risk more than I would receive. So I pass my animosity checks and just end the turn. The game is over. That was a long one. The Orcs and Goblins managed to win, but what a weird game. Obviously, I got some things wrong, which I feel really bad about, but I think a lot of things broke in my favor just in general. I think the terrain did hamper my opponent's advance more than it hampered mine. He took a bunch of casualties from difficult terrain, the wildwoods, and maybe just not being able to get clear charges with multiple units. Generally, I think my list matched up fairly well against the High Elf list. But part of that was the prevalence of artillery that I had, which really ended up not doing a whole lot of anything. And then the grenade units like the Mangler Squigs, the Night Goblin Fanatics, and the Squig Herd. The Squig Herd, it had a rough start, but it was important later on for sneaking a wound or two through the Phoenix and for just supplying a rank bonus. It was also my best combat unit that I had left on the table at the end and probably helped dissuade the spearmen from charging into my big guns. Although the Squigs versus a unit of High Elf spears is an interesting proposition. The Squigs are going to take a lot of damage. They're going to do a lot of damage. I'm not sure who comes out on top in that situation. But I wasn't exactly eager to find out, as you can tell by that last turn of mine. I was very happy with the Chaff Battle on the right. I think he had more points invested over there than I did, and I did manage to pick up a couple of those things and keep my own units relatively intact. Magic didn't achieve a whole lot on my side. I didn't really expect it to, but it didn't achieve a whole lot on the High Elf side, which I think is a bigger deal. I think there were a lot of important combats where my opponent really underperformed with his to hit and to wound rolls. Defensively, he did pretty well, but you don't usually win a game of Warhammer through defense. Some of the maneuvers that I did had some real risk-benefit kind of situations, but quite a few of them paid off, especially the troll charge towards the Phoenix in the very beginning. That could have gone wrong really fast. Also, some maneuvering at the end. If my opponent had managed to get a couple of long charges, things could have gone a lot differently. Obviously, I did some real bonehead maneuvers too. I should not have faced my Wolf Riders towards the enemy, knowing that they could fail Animosity and go hurtling themselves towards them. Not a lot I could have done with that Squig Herd failing its Animosity check in the very beginning. That took a lot of agency out of my hand, taking two of my most powerful units out of the first turn of the game with that Frostheart sitting right in front of it and everyone bearing down on me. So what I'm saying is, it was a really fun game, and I'm happy with the result, but I can't take a lot of credit for it. Stuff just kind of happened, and I think a lot of it shook out in my favor. Very nice list that my opponent showed up with, a lot of fun to play against, and I'm really happy that he offered me the game in the first place. So that about wraps it up. If you have any questions, observations, or concerns, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below, and I will see you on the next one.